Sāksim mēs ar pirmo.
So we will start with our first
uzrunu.
speaker.
Un savā ziņā tas ir cilvēks, kurš ir savējis šeit jau kaut kāds
This is a person who's been living here in Latvia for about 10 years. So he's organic farmer from the Netherlands, but working in Latvia. So he will tell us about farming and healthy soil. We understand that healthy soil is the most important thing in our work. So there are some things that are really important. So we have this green regulations. So please meet SIA Grīnis.
Ed, welcome to the stage. There you are.
Yeah.
There's the clicker.
Yeah, okay.
You can use that. Un šobrīd Menti.com ir iespēja uzrakstīt savus jautājumus.
So now you can enter your questions in Menti.
Please write them in Menti.com and push the button submit. Ed, you're on.
Thanks. Thanks for the invitation to talk today on this conference for eAgronom and Doyers. And I would like to go today, not drive in a tractor, not drive in a car, but we go with a helicopter a little bit in the air to see where we are, in the world, to see where we are in Europe. I think we can be busy on our fields all the time, look the grains, look the potatoes. Every day we spend a lot of time to get the best crop out, let the cows give the maximum yield, or go for the quality of the vegetables. But sometimes we also need to see where we are in the world. And I like in these presentations to go a little bit back and go deeper in this. A little bit about myself, not too long. To be honest, I grew up in a farm in the Netherlands. If you talk about arable farming in the Netherlands, it always looks like a vegetable garden. We operated there in the family 100 hectares. But mostly with tulips, with seed potatoes and carrots, onions. And if we talk about rest, we have grains. And if you talk about grains in the Baltics, it's totally opposite. I did study tourism. The plan was not to be a farmer. After the study, I pretty quick went into real estate. I'm now active 30 years in the real estate. And in this profession, with buying farms for farmers, we have the challenge also to make business plans and to look through the mirror, how can you make money? What you need to do to make money, and how can you be efficient? And that opened my eyes, because farming is a really interesting business, but if you see the margins wherein we work, they are very small. We talk about 1-2%. And only efficiency will bring at the end profit. Today I'm farming self in Limburgy, northern part of Latvia, Vidzeme, 1,500 hectare organic grains. We do a lot of service jobs also with harvesting. I'm active in SIA Baltic Organic. We import compost from the Netherlands, where is a problem with phosphor-rich manures which are composted and where they need rid of it. And that is one of the issues what we have in the Baltics. We miss this phosphorus. Enough about myself. If we look in the world, what is going on? We had the elections with Trump. We see a new direction. America is going for protectionism. America first. 8 years ago, when Trump became first-time president, the Dutch made a joke. Trump first, America first, and Netherlands second. But of course, so does the world not work. If you look in the history, you see that the whole world is one power play for welfare and power. And if you look in the mirror what is now going on in China, in America, in India, and also Russia, we see that this power is getting new directions. And in that we need to act. If we look then to our own situation in Europe, it's good to go a little bit back in history. With the start of the European Union, and the start of the European Union for agricultural tasks and forecast is made by Sikkel Mansholt. And that was a Dutch guy. And if you look, what was the main target after the war? Security of food, never hunger again. This was what we had in 1944. There's a picture of Amsterdam, people in rows, no food, going to the countryside, looking for farmers to get some potatoes, to get some vegetables. In 1945, after the war, Europe was full with this item, never hunger again. And if we see the whole development of agriculture, all is based on that statement. We will see that later. How did they do this? If you look in the structure of agricultural farming in Europe after the war, all was small. Farms from 1 hectare, 2 hectares, 3 hectares, 5 cows, 2 horses. In the Netherlands, they made a system where you had the obligation to give your lands to the government, and those lands were spread everywhere, and at the end you got it back home. So with a forced reconstruction of field location, they gave speed up the whole efficiency of farming. There's no traveling more on the roads, big blocks. If we go back, this upscaling also happened in Eastern Europe with the kolkhoz structure. The only thing what we did see, there was no commitment. Farms were big. A lot of people were working, but zero efficiency. And if you look what happened in West Europe, the efficiency went to an extreme high level. If you look for the war, if a farmer had 20 cows, he had 4 workers for 20 cows. If we look to the situation today, one farmer can handle 65 cows and sometimes up to 100 cows. And this whole innovation of efficiency went up pretty quick. What we also did see is that the number of workers which were active in agriculture went down pretty quick. If you saw about 1800, 45% of all labor was working in agriculture, simply to provide your own food. If you look today, 2010, it's only 3%. And this change of food security, increase of efficiency, brought the European Union. What did it bring more? The part of our income, what we're spending on food, goes every year down. In the history, sometimes 40, 50, up to 60% of all the money we got in, we spent for food. If you look today, it's almost around 10%. And what was the goal behind this? One of the biggest goals was, of course, never hunger again. But the second thing was, food was a part of the industrialization, because all workers which were not needed more on farms, they could work in factories. We needed the labor for factories. The labor came available, and part of our income, what we spent on food, what if you look in history was high, went down all the time. And this whole element was a big part of the strategy of European Union. Never hunger again, welfare, and labor available for non-agriculture. If you look, what was the system? for a farmer, the whole system was based on one thing: output based on tons and hectares. And in the European Union, we worked with fixed prices. So farmers were stimulated to produce, not to be an entrepreneur, simply to produce. We needed to produce tons of butter, tons of grains, and the pricing was secured. You always get paid. If you look to the structure of the European Union, and we compare this with the old European countries and the new European countries, because Latvia and the other Baltic countries joined relatively late, so we don't have this history, what happened in the West. If you see for the efficiency on farms in the old European countries, high efficiency farming. In the Netherlands, we have output from 13, 14 tons of wheat, cows, 13,000 liters a cow, 800 tons of sugar beets. Everything is on the max. All the time we put the max out. If you look to new European countries, the efficiency is much lower. Fertility of the soils. If I see the problems in the West, we have discussions about water pollutions. We have discussion about over-fertilizing with phosphorus, with nitrogens. If you look to the situation in the Baltics, that is the opposite. All levels are still pretty low. And the same is with the activity of the soils, of the yields from the production. And for example, farming education. If I get on my farm practicants which come from a Dutch farm, I can send them with tractors, I can send them with a seeder, with a combine, they'll learn everything. If I get practicants here from Breakaway or from Jelgava, the level, to be honest, simply say it through, the level is lower. The agricultural level in farming is in the West much higher. The same thing is with farming's infrastructure. In the West, it's high developed. If you grow, for example, vegetables or potatoes, what we have in West Europe, we have trading houses, all farmers have storage houses, we have commissionaires, we have all technical close. The whole infrastructure is there to sell and to deliver year-round. And also, if a product needed to be imported from Turkey or from Africa, these whole logistic hubs are in the West, and they are not in the East. And if we want to improve that, we need to act that also this infrastructure is better developed in the eastern part of Europe. If I look to innovation, in the Netherlands, we have land prices today up to 150,000 to 200,000 euro. Extreme high. And how stay farmers alive with this? Of course, it's not easy to repay your loans, but they still buy and they still act. How they do it? One of the things is simply to have a high drive, a high motivation to stay farmer and to move forward. So all the time, if you look on one street, you have sometimes 5 farmers, and they are all the time competing and looking what can do better, which yields can do, which experiments you can do, all the time to improve. And if I compare these two worlds, the West and the East, I see there a difference. The innovation competition to move forward in the West is much higher because simply they need to stay alive. If you look where we are in agriculture of today, what is the paradox of the farmer? If you look from European Union, we have the Green Deal. We have all the green thinking to leave the earth better behind is that we got it. But on the other side, we simply have a business to run. So we all the time need to think, do we go for this greening issue? Or do we go for the economics, for the money? And I think everybody in his soul, if you have this business, you first go for money. Simply, as soon as you stop paying your bills, the business stops. On the other side, 2 slides ago, I showed European Union farming structure, all is based on input, output based on tons and hectares. If you look today, the whole infrastructure of the whole policy European Union is still the same. Because for what we get paid for tons we produced and sold. But do we get money for the flowers which have a very good smell, or which are extra strong by growing in the soil and not on water, or the flavor of the product, or the nutrients which are there? To make a long story short, no. We get paid for our the tons. And the hectare support we get on hectares. The whole structure is tons and hectares. But on the other side, if we look in the European Union, what's happening? From one side, the European Union is giving all kind of green thinking issues and give obligations for that. At the same time, we need to operate in a world where the European Union is making free trade agreements with several countries and continents. For example, Latin America, with Canada, with Thailand, with Turkey. If you see what this means, it means that the borders get open for products which are produced in a condition which is sometimes more favorable, and which is also where it is allowed to use different methods, pesticides, chemicals, which are on the blacklist in the European Union. And this is simply happening. In this world, we need to act. If we look on the other side to ourselves, where are we in the Baltics? If we look to some maps, and this is simply data what you can get from internet, from the European Union. If you look to the phosphor levels, you see Baltics is red. Central Europe, West Europe, blue. We are low in phosphorus. We are low in potassium. We are also low in pH. If you see that soil fertility in West Europe, Central Europe is basic or even over-fertilized, and I see the situation what we have in the Baltics, our fertilization standard is not on a basic level. For a lot of farms, it's even under the basic levels. We still need to repair our soils to come to a situation where all nutrients are there. So from one side, we need to compete in a world what's getting more an open world, where food is also a political issue, with the power play what's happening in the world. We need to think green, and we need to act in a situation where a lot of our soils are not fertilized on the right standard. If you look to some data in Europe, and you see, for example, the land prices for 1 hectare, I already mentioned Netherlands, 150,000 up to 200,000 for arable land. If you look here, this table, it's not pretty clear, but I can assure you we are still in the cheapest zones. The cheapest land of Europe is in the Baltics. The lowest land prices of Europe are in the Baltics. So we are still low here. And the same is if you look to labor costs. Our labor cost, if you look on European scale, is still pretty low. And the same is, and that is, I think this table with the green colors is really interesting. If you look to output and to workers' output, the financing in farms in the Baltics is the lowest, almost the lowest in Europe. So we are working in an atmosphere where we have the lowest land prices, we have the lowest rent prices, we have low labor costs, we have low financing. We know Latvian banks are not very moving forward to give big loans to everybody, always a little bit scared from, can you pay back? And if I compare these financing degrees on small family farms in the Netherlands, where you have millions of debts, and they still pay the bills. And if you then look to the income for the farming per worker, and the worker can also be the farmer himself, or it is yourself on a family farm, or it are the employees, then we are also pretty low in the last end of Europe with the income what we get from that. What is the conclusion of this? From one side, we need to act more competitive. What is happening in Europe with free trade, open concurrence? We have low land prices, low rent prices, all kind of cost levels which are pretty low, and still our income is on the low side if you compare it in Europe. If you look, is then everything negative? No. We have rain. And I had a few years ago a nice talk with a friend, a Dutch guy who was farming in Oriol in Russia. I don't know, he's still there. And I was saying to him, I'm so jealous for this nice black soils what you have, because I really need to do something, otherwise there is growing nothing. And he said, but Ed, look it on a different way. You have rain. We have a small amount of rain. And you can do fertilization what you want, but without rain is growing nothing. All is rain. And if you look to these numbers in Baltics, we are pretty okay with that. Another thing is our temperature. For growing grains, if you look in Romania or Czech Republic or Spain, it is getting too hot on the moments that the corns are filled up. We are still pretty low with our temperatures. All is in the right atmosphere. It is 18 degrees, 22 degrees for grain growing, perfect. This slide I show often in presentations what I give, and it always looks a little bit technical, but it's really interesting to look at and to go a little bit deeper in it. Because if you see this table, here is a comparison with Bratislava in Slovakia with Lembergy. And what you see is that in Czech Republic, there is a longer time where your crops can grow. You have more growing days. But during this growing vegetation period, there are also more extremes, with extreme wet and extreme cold. And in the season, you see that the up and downs during a day with night and day temperature is highly fluctuating. And that means that plants all the time go from active growing to sleeping. Active growing, sleeping. And how is this in the Baltics? That's totally different. Our vegetation period is short, very short. But in this time, we have a lot of light. It's almost there that it not get dark. And in this time, we have a nice, smooth temperature. The difference between day and night is very small. So that means that our plants want to grow explosive. And they also need to do this, because to get these yields, these comparable yields with Central Europe, we have only a very short vegetation period. And that makes that our climate is very sensitive for things which are not in order. If we have a spring which is very wet, few days not growing, 1 week lost. When the corns need to be filled, we have no sun or something, again a week lost. We have so easy that we miss things in the growing process to get the max yield. And one of the most important things is that your soil is active. Because in this very short period, I always say, if you seed, your seed has something like a chip. And the first what he do is which growing conditions I have. What is there on food in the soil? What is missing? Is the temperature okay? And this seed want to grow as quick as possible. But if something is missing, it goes directly in a self-protection modus. And if that takes too long, we don't get the top yields out. And if you compare that with Central Europe, there are much more possibilities because of the longer season, that if it's a period a little bit wet or it is too hot, to compensate that. We have no compensation opportunities. This I already mentioned. We have low land prices, low rent prices, low labor costs, and low income, blah, blah, blah. One of the keys to get competitive, to stay competitive, is to work on our soils. Because the data is public. You can get it from internet everywhere. Our levels, nutrients levels, are low. If you have active soils, you have higher yields. We have stronger plants. To talk in the direction of like what Europe's like, if we have stronger plants, also less pesticides are needed. We have a higher nutrient value. And at the end, quality and quantity is simply money, profit. Yeah. What is missing in the Baltics is a strong infrastructure. A chain of storage facilities, of processing plants, chain of suppliers, of trading companies, of logistical hubs, also an active banking system, and maybe more working together in cooperatives, not only the big ones, but also between farmers. Act together, buy technique together, share this cost. Because what we see today in farming is that our break-even point all the time goes up. Our 0 point is only rising. And to stay competitive, I think the challenge for future is to bring that down. I come slowly till the end. Here a picture of some wheat from, I think, a few years ago from my farm. Some barley, some spring wheat. People often ask me, you are organic. Are you, from your strong belief, organic? Or are you a romanticus who is organic? And then I always say, I don't think that the discussion is about to be organic or not organic. Everything starts with healthy soil. And in this, if you have your soil central, you can work also in a conventional way to try to get stronger plants and to use pesticides and fertilizers to a minimum to give the boost to get your tons. Or in organic way, not to only do plowing and seeding and the rest do nothing, but try to take care of the quality of your crops. And in my opinion, it doesn't matter if you are then organic or conventional. That's a non-discussion. If we want to stay competitive in Europe, stay competitive even in the world, I think we have really a big job to do. And I think it's also something what needs attention on government level. Because if I see what is happening in Brussels and what other countries are fighting for to get the best situation for their farmers, I sometimes have feeling, and I see it from a distance, that we talk about small things. Or we talk about, or we say nothing, because we are a small country. We do this nicking. We go in the flow. But if you see that we have these parameters, a lot of costs, we have the lowest, but we make no money, I'm convinced that the biggest part of this issue is soil health. And I think we should somewhere get it on attention from government and also from Brussels, that we get that we get more flexibility to repair our soils. And if you look what was in September in the news, it looks like that also Brussels will give more space to countries to act more on national level, to not give only these instructions from Brussels like a preacher who say this is my evangeli and this is the truth. It looks like they will give more opportunities to follow more needs what every specific country needs. And I think this is one of the, like the hand which is coming out from Brussels to take it and to get all power to get our soils in a better condition. Thanks for your attention. I stay here also a little bit available for all kinds of questions, and feel free to contact me.
Thank you. First, Ed, you mentioned a lot of things which in Europe has like more efficiency, higher yields, over-fertilized maybe sometimes soil. Is there anything we're doing right in Latvia?
I think we do a lot of things right. And I think if you look, you can see the story like this as negative. But I think use it as an eye-opener, because we have still a lot of parameters which are still in our favor. Low prices, low labor, and everything. And of course, if you look on your farm, you can see it in a different way. But if you look at on a global scale, as a farming business, we have still a lot of parameters which are still in our benefits. Mm-hmm. But if the soil is empty, you can plow and work what you want, but the yield will not be there.
Then the question, if someone would ask you from your colleagues in the rest of the Europe, why Latvia? So what is so good in Latvia doing farming?
Climate, rain, 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 still low prices. And if you act smarter as your neighbors, you still can make steps. Uh-huh. And if I'm now active 9 years, I have no farming education, I didn't get a lot of money from family to buy a farm. I bought my farm, SIA Grīnis, with 100,000 euro to pay off some debts. We started 100% financed. And today we have, for organic size, a relative big farm which is running okay. And these steps you still can make here. It's get more difficult, but it's still possible.
Mm-hmm. So we still have some questions, very specific ones. So are you saying that you will be the whole day here today?
Not the whole day, I fly back, yeah. But a part of till the beginning of afternoon I'm here.
Good. So please ask your very specific questions to Ed. He will be very happy to answer. And we're moving on. Thank you very much.
Yeah.